Hello, and I hope this message finds you well. I've been greatly enjoying my reading series. I wasn't really planning on making it a series, but after I read a passage from the first book, which was Letting Go by David Hawkins, I just liked doing it so much that I did another book, and now I'm doing a third, and I have a fourth planned as well. I'm finding this just a really enjoyable way to share knowledge and to kind of remind myself of some of the ideas and some of the authors who have helped me along my path at different times and in different ways. So I'm going to continue that, tradition today with The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. Now, this book holds a really special place in my heart because of the time at which I read it. I read it right after Letting Go by David Hawkins, and so these two books will sort of always be linked in my mind. Letting Go being a really wonderful catalyst of individual awakening, and this book, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, being sort of a return to the earth, having awakened, or an exploration of practicality, of service. That is to say, once we have in mind or are in touch with a higher ideal, how do we sort of spread that? How do we actualize it in the world? This book is a spiritual book, but it is also a political book. It is about how we inhabit the world with a sort of awakened activism, an enlightened activism, and how we enfold others into that project, invite them into that project, that spirit. I want to talk about how the book is structured and what its major themes or tenets are, and then I'm going to read a passage from the very end of the book, which I believe is the most sort of inspired or delivered passage that I have read in all of Charles Eisenstein's writing. That is, it seems to be a story that comes from some realm beyond this one, and that was sort of handed to Charles to write down. There's very little mind in it. It has a feeling of being almost mythic, a story that could have been told for generations, or even more so, I would say, just outside of time, a story from another dimension. But first, just to talk about this book in general, from the largest lens, here's what I see as Charles Eisenstein's main message for humanity. Humanity's real nature is to live in harmony, to live in purpose, to live in deep community, to be connected to the earth and to one another, and to feel life itself as a spiritual thing, to not need to flee material existence to find a sense of the sacred, but rather to encounter that right here in our relationships with one another and in our every moment. However, at some point in history, and Charles talks about various sort of breaking points throughout his work, there was the emergence of what he calls the Age of Separation. And the Age of Separation tells us a very different story about ourselves. It tells us the story of the individual who is in competition with other individuals for resources, who is threatened by the earth itself and so needs to distance the individual self from the earth. And it results in all of these divisions with which we now live, all of these polarities. So we have man versus woman, straight versus gay, humanity versus nature. We have divisions among classes, among races, and we have this very lonely, alienated, and hostile world, which is the height, the result of the age of separation. Now, in all of his works, Eisenstein also holds forth a prophecy for what he calls the age of reunion. This is when humanity will remember its nature of harmony, its nature of peace, its nature of alignment with, rather than deviation from the will of nature. And people will once again form tight communities, will let go of their resentment, racial, class, and all these other divisions will start to dissolve, and we will basically regain our place as stewards of, protectors of the earth, rather than its destroyers. So we have kind of the mythic state when humanity was more together in these collectives, more knew how to live. We have the age of separation, and we have the prophecy of the age of reunion. Eisenstein always holds out these three stages in his writing. Between the age of separation and the age of reunion, we will go through what Eisenstein calls the space between stories. This is where it feels like the stories in which we live and the society structured on them are collapsing. And we don't yet know the new story that characterizes the age of reunion, where things will be more harmonious, more joyous, more peaceable. And so we're stuck in this place of, I don't know what to do, I don't know if I'm crazy, I don't know where I belong, as things fall apart. There are opportunities here for psychosis, for renewed divisions, for feelings of lostness or wrongness. And it is in this space, the space between stories, where Eisenstein always meets the reader. He wants the reader to know, I believe in the age of reunion. I believe in the principle of interbeing, that we are all in this together, not in a superficial, but rather in an elemental way. And yet, I find that I am walking in foreign territory to get to this heralded stage for humanity. In other words, I, the author, Charles Eisenstein, don't fully know what I am doing either. And so from this sort of open-hearted, vulnerable place, he is able to meet the emotional protests and uncertainties that come up in the reader, and to identify with and teach about those, not as though Eisenstein has figured it all out and is merely handing down some principles, but rather living through this journey with us, the readership. Because part of the age of reunion, as opposed to the age of separation, is that the teacher too becomes a student. The teacher is learning alongside the student body and merely articulating their own learning. They are not some exalted figure who has divined all the answers. So for that reason, the book is very beautifully structured emotionally. It's sort of a walkthrough of all the emotions we might encounter and all their associated dynamics and situations as we proceed through this space between stories from the age of separation to the age of reunion. So for instance, the first chapter is called Breakdown, the first chapter is called Separation. What does it feel like to be birthed into the story of separation? What ailments, psychological and otherwise, does it cause? The next chapter is Breakdown. What happens when our belief in this story begins to break down? What sorts of transformations might we go through? Other chapter titles include Despair, Hope, Naivete, Scarcity, Pain, Judgment, Hate, psychopathy, disruption, miracle. Through this ensemble of these emotional states, of these dynamics, Eisenstein shares his sense of the pathway that we walk, both individually and collectively, and hopes to guide us along it, hopes to act as a guide, although once again, he also stands alongside us in this journey. So the piece that I'm going to read from today is from the final chapter in the book, which is called Initiation. And Eisenstein provides this myth here about how we might have gotten into this situation in the space between stories in the first place. In other words, what the setup, what the backstory might have been for our being here. And as with my other readings, I'm going to pause periodically and I'm going to reflect on some of what is being shared. But my real intention here is just to familiarize you with his writing. A gathering of the tribe. Once upon a time, a great tribe of people lived in a world far away from ours. Whether far away in space or in time or even outside of time, we do not know. They lived in a state of enchantment and joy that few of us today dare to believe could exist, except in those exceptional peak experiences when we glimpse the true potential of life and mind. A couple things here. One, Eisenstein is purposeful in situating this story not necessarily far away in space or in time, but perhaps outside of time altogether. That is, it has a spiritual quality. This story that he's about to share is something whose truth we can feel independent of where we ourselves might be situated in space and time. Therefore, it has this sort of fuzzy feeling of something extra dimensional, a transcendent truth. The second thing is he talks about how the people of this tribe live in a kind of bliss that we ourselves would not know except in peak experiences. Say a drug experience, a meditation experience, ecstatic love or dance, or a retreat you've gone to. For Eisenstein, these sorts of experiences are rememberings of the way life is really supposed to be. They remind us of this other realm mentioned in this story. One day, the elders of the tribe called a meeting. They gathered around, and one of them spoke very solemnly. My friends, she said, there is a world that needs our help. It is called Earth, and its fate hangs in the balance. Its humans have reached a critical point in their collective birthing, the same point our own planet was at 1 million years ago, and they will be stillborn without our help. Who would like to volunteer for a mission to this time and place and render service to humanity? A couple things here. One, this planet referred to in the story crossed the same conundrum that Earth currently finds itself in. So necessarily in this story there is hope. This planet navigated a version of the crisis we ourselves face, and they survived and are even thriving. The second thing, and I just want to pose this as a question, this leader says they will be stillborn, the Earthlings will be stillborn without our help. What would it mean for humanity to be stillborn, to cease to emerge in its fullness as a being or as a collective? What would it mean for our evolution to be stalled at a point? Tell us more about this mission, they asked. It is no small thing. Our shaman will put you into a deep, deep trance, so complete that you will forget who you are. You will live a human life, and in the beginning you will completely forget your origins. You will forget even our language and your own true name. You will be separated from the wonder and beauty of our world and from the love that bathes us all. You will miss it deeply, yet you will be unable to name what you are missing. You will remember the love and beauty that we know to be normal only as a longing in your heart. Your memory will take the form of an intuitive knowledge as you plunge into the painfully marred earth that a more beautiful world is possible. So, if you've had any form of spiritual awakening, or even some number of the peak experiences I referred to earlier, think of how your life felt before that. Think of being in the trance of status quo existence. I need to get a job, I need to get married, I need to be successful, and I am basically a cog in the machine producing these outcomes. And think about the intuitive feeling underneath that there was something wrong with this existence, or to pose the dynamic differently, that there was something else you could be experiencing, and yet you couldn't quite put your finger on it. That is the sensation Eisenstein is describing here. As he says elsewhere in the book, I believe in the very beginning actually, this sensation, this remembering of a greater existence, can also be signaled by pathologies in our society. Think about depression as a form of resistance, as a not wanting to do what you are told. Think about the sort of senseless anger that we sometimes see in events like mass shootings. In what ways are these protests to something greater, although it cannot be named? So this sort of hypnosis, this slumber, is what is poetically being called forth here. As you grow up in that world, your knowledge will be under constant assault. You'll be told in a million ways that a world of destruction, violence, drudgery, anxiety, and degradation is normal. You may go through a time when you are completely alone, with no allies to affirm your knowledge of a more beautiful world. You may plunge into a depth of despair that we, in our world of light, cannot imagine. But no matter what, a spark of knowledge will never leave you. A memory of your true origin will be encoded in your DNA. That spark will lie within you, inextinguishable until one day it is awakened. You see, even though you will feel for a time utterly alone, you will not be alone. We will send you assistance, help that you will experience as miraculous, experiences that you will describe as transcendent. These will fan that spark into a flame. For a few moments or hours or days, you will reawaken to the beauty and the joy that is meant to be. You will see it on Earth, for even though the planet and its people are deeply wounded, there is beauty there still, projected from past and future onto the present as a promise of what is possible and a reminder of what is real. Just a small note here, which is that, again, I see it as very artful, that he says this beauty that we feel and sometimes experience, even in the age of separation, even in the toxicity of our dominant civilization, that it stems not only from the past, but also from the future. So remember the framework I laid out at the beginning with the original age of togetherness, then the age of separation, then the coming age of reunion. So we have both the genetic memory of how our ancestors once lived, a way that was more in tune with natural rhythms and so forth. And we have also this premonition, this feeling that this could be again on a grander scale, and that in some way it's our purpose to help create that world. So it's not merely from the past, but also from the future, this feeling. After that glimpse, the flame may die down into an ember again as the routines of normal life there swallow you up. But after each awakening, they will seem less normal, and the story of that world will seem less real. The ember will glow brighter. When enough embers do that, they will all burst into flame together and sustain each other. So think about, say you've been to a retreat or you've had one of these peak experiences I referred to earlier. And then you go back to your job or you go back to a relationship that no longer feels in tune with whom you really know yourself to be. What formerly felt like your reality, that job, that relationship, now feels like a dream. And what you experienced at the retreat, or in whatever situation conjured your peak experience, now feels more like reality. And eventually the axis tips, especially when supported by a community of other people who are more on your wavelength, and you can no longer go back to the dream which previously you held as reality. That's the transformation, the zenith he's talking about here. And if you haven't experienced this yet, you will. Because remember, you will not be there alone. As you begin to awaken to your mission, you will meet others of our tribe. You will recognize them by your common purpose, values, and intuitions, and by the similarity of the paths you have walked. As the condition of the planet Earth reaches crisis proportions, your paths will cross more and more. The time of loneliness, the time of thinking you might be crazy, will be over. Now, this sensation of meeting others from the tribe can be described in a few ways. One is through the lens of reincarnation, which is sort of how I was introduced to this feeling. There's a feeling that I've known this person before, which goes along with the story of the old tribe coming back together. However, this dynamic is also explicable without a notion of reincarnation, merely through beings becoming aligned through this greater intelligence in the earth. The earth produces experiences which gives individual beings a sense of alignment. So you don't necessarily need to believe in reincarnation or believe in this story literally in order to have experienced this sensation of synchronicity, where you encounter a person and you feel like there's an alignment, there's a destiny for the two of us or for a larger group that I can't quite put my finger on, but it's there. It's calling to me. You will find the people of your tribe all over the earth and become aware of them through the long-distance communication technologies used on that planet. But the real shift, the real quickening, will happen in face-to-face gatherings in special places. When many of you gather together, you will launch a new stage on your journey. A journey that, I assure you, will end where it begins right now. Again, we have the convergence of the past and the future here. Then, the mission that lay unconscious within you will flower into consciousness. Your intuitive rebellion against the world presented to you as normal will become an explicit quest to create a more beautiful one. This is a very important shift he's talking about here. Think of the ways in which you or others in your community may currently rail against all that is toxic in our world. You might use as your focal point the patriarchy, capitalism, whiteness, old school masculinity, toxic masculinity, or all of these targets against which we might project our anger. What Eisenstein is saying here is that eventually we realize that underneath that anger is this memory, this vision of a world beyond those enemies, of the more beautiful world that we remember and can help create. And our quest shifts from one of blame and critique to one of building. What can we build that is positive? How can we build the world we want to live in? The critique is part of this quest. A woman said, "Tell us more about the time of loneliness that we might prepare for it." The elder said, "In the time of loneliness, you will always be seeking to reassure yourself that you are not crazy. You will do that by telling people all about what is wrong with the world, and you will feel a sense of betrayal when they don't listen to you. You might hunger for stories of wrongness, atrocity, and ecological destruction, all of which confirm the validity of your intuition that a more beautiful world exists. But after you have fully received the help we will send you, and the quickening of your gatherings, you will no longer need to do that, because you will know. Your energy will thereafter turn toward actively creating the more beautiful world. A tribeswoman asked, "How do you know this will work? Are you sure our shaman's powers are great enough to send us on such a journey?" The elder replied, "I know it will work because he has done it many times before. Many have already been sent to Earth to live human lives and to lay the groundwork for the mission you will undertake now. He's been practicing. The only difference now is that many of you will venture there at once. What is new in the time you will live in is that you will gather in critical mass and each awaken the other to your mission. The heat you will generate will kindle the same spark that lies in every human being, for in truth, each one is from a tribe like ours. The whole galaxy and beyond is converging on Earth, for never before has a planet journeyed so far into separation and made it back again. Those of you who go will be part of a new step in cosmic evolution." A few things I want to comment on briefly in this passage. I'm feeling a little stressed because I have a bit of a time pressure to finish this. So when he talks about the heat kindling the same spark that lies in every human being, again, this goes against the notion expressed earlier that perhaps some are from the tribe and some are not, which might fit into the mythology of reincarnation. Instead, as is clearly laid out in this passage, everyone in some form carries this knowledge and it can be called forth. The other thing that I want to mention just briefly here is the new step in cosmic evolution. That means each of our lives has a purpose which far extends beyond ourselves. Oh, and that was the other thing. He talks about us awakening the spark in each other. This denotes awakening as a collective process. Perhaps in the age of separation, it was an individual process, and we had individual gurus like Jesus, the Buddha. In our modern day, we have Tony Robbins, Eckhart Tolle, Marianne Williamson, so on and so forth. But perhaps now we're transitioning to an era where awakening is collective. And so one way of framing this, or one conclusion, is that our work as an individual is never done. Another is that there is no work as an individual. There is only the work of the collective. A tribesman asked, "Is there a danger we will become lost in that world and never wake up from the shamanic trance? Is there a danger that the despair, the cynicism, the pain of separation will be so great that it will extinguish the spark of hope, the spark of our true selves and origin, and that we will be separated from our beloved ones forever?" The elder replied, "That is impossible. The more deeply you get lost, the more powerful the help we will send you. You might experience it at the time as a collapse of your personal world, the loss of everything important to you. Later, you will recognize the gift within it. We will never abandon you." Important piece of data here. Eisenstein articulates earlier in the book that as the age of separation collapses on a collective scale, which we might see in events like the 2008 financial crash, like 9/11, currently when I'm recording this, coronavirus is a huge revelation of the instability or insufficiency of our system. We also experience personal collapses. So we might go through a divorce, we might lose our job, we might get addicted to drugs and wind up in a halfway house. These can be observed as initiations rather than falls from grace. Another man asked, "Is it possible that our mission will fail and that this planet, Earth, will perish?" The elder replied, "I will answer your question with a paradox. It is impossible that your mission will fail, yet its success hangs on your own actions. The fate of the world is in your hands. The key to this paradox lies within you, in the feeling you carry that each of your actions, Even your personal secret struggles has cosmic significance. You will know then, as you know now, that everything you do matters. I want to speak just for a moment to this paradox. It is impossible that the mission will fail, yet its success hangs on your own actions. What this means is that it is necessary for the mission to succeed that each of us believes it is possible. And so faith is an essential ingredient to the new, the more beautiful world being born. There were no more questions. The volunteers gathered in a circle, and the shaman went to each one. The last thing each was aware of was the shaman blowing smoke in his or her face. They entered a deep trance and dreamed themselves into the world where we find ourselves today. I have to go momentarily, so this has been a reading from this wonderful book by Charles Eisenstein, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And I just want to say that what I see as the lasting value of this book, and why I view it as significant that I read it right after David Hawkins's Letting Go, which again is a transformation of individual consciousness, is that this book teaches us how spirituality exists in symbiosis with service, and how each of us bears a responsibility to the others to help awaken them, to help uplift the collective and align it with this purpose of engendering a more beautiful world. After an individual awakening, what else is there to do but be of service? This book articulates and helps guide us along the emotional trespasses contained therein. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a blessed day. Goodbye.